It's Monday, April 22nd, 2024. It's not time for the playoffs in Detroit, but it is time for the Knee Jerks podcast with Nick, and Big Al. I am the Big Al of the equation, Al Beaton, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, are my partners in crime. First off, the baby of our group, the new guy. He's going to be the new guy for quite a while, I think, and that would be Nick Milanovich. How's things going, Nick? Who, by the way, is in Michigan right now, not on the left coast.
That's right. I'm in the metropolitan Livonia area. So just hanging. Lenova, I don't know what the hell that even means, but yep, I'm out here for a little while longer, but heading west in a few days.
Yes, and Nick has all kinds of stories about eclipses and hams, which we'll talk about later. So,
yep.
Oh, and of course, joining me is my longtime partner in crime, the man who has a Substack that you please need to read. That would be Greg Eno. Greg, how's things? Tell us what's going on, and then you can go right to our interview.
Yeah, thanks, Al. Please do check out my Substack, gregeno.substack.com. I would appreciate that. Subscribe while it's free.
Yes.
It will be in your inbox every Monday, and today's column is appropriate for today's discussion, as I talked about Dylan Larkin, Steve Yzerman, and the Red Wings, and so forth, and what better day to do that than on the day that we have back on our show a friend, we can now safely say, a friend of the Knee Jerks, Mr. Keith Gave, author, former Red Wings beat writer for the Free Press, friend of the show. Keith, my friend, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. I only wish that instead of doing this tonight, we were watching Detroit play the New York Rangers in Game 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah,
I thought we were going there. I thought we were going to be there.
Yeah, I did too. I still had hopes, even especially after David Perron scored that crazy game-tying goal in Montreal. I thought, okay, this is fate. Fate's a company.
It sure felt like it.
Yeah, it did, didn't it? For about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
we got word from Philadelphia. Torts pulled the goalie, which he had to do, by the way. A lot of folks are mad about that, but the Flyers needed.
I don't get that. People want to blame John Tortorella. My God, all he was trying to do is get his team in the playoffs. They were in the same spot Detroit was, trying to fight their way in. He did exactly the right thing, and people want to get ticked off at him for that, because Detroit doesn't make it. That's ridiculous.
And had he known what was happening in Montreal, there's nothing Torts would have liked more than to knock the Capitals out of the playoffs. Believe me.
Sure.
And but it didn't work out that way, and here you go. But that's okay. We still have lots to talk about because this was a fantastic season in a lot of respects. Also, kind of a, I tell you what, Keith. One thing I noticed about this, and maybe this is, you know me. I've been around the block. I've been following this team since 1970, and I've been with you, reading you and chronicling. You chronicled all those cups, and I was right there. And I just feel like, having experienced all that, I'm not as jaded maybe as some of the other fans are who are not old enough, quite frankly, to remember some of those cup-winning teams and all those exciting playoff series we watched, even in the years that they did not win the cup in the 90s, which were just filled with excitement. And I remember, staying up late to watch those West Coast games and watching Brendan Shanahan score double overtime goals at 1 o'clock in the morning and stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, just good stuff. But Keith, what I noticed was in this last week or so of the season, I felt like I was watching playoff hockey because the Red Wings, their backs were against the wall. They had to win almost every night. Every rush up and down the ice was exciting. The games went into overtime. The Red Wings would fall behind and come back. I felt like I was watching playoff hockey.
You were watching. I said that a month ago that we're going to have playoff hockey the rest of the season because they kept inching their way back, getting back in the playoff picture. But Detroit was one of 5 teams playing playoff hockey for the last 3 weeks of the season. 5 teams playing for 2 playoff spots, and frankly, because Washington played their own playoff games down the stretch too, I'll be shocked if they win a game. They look emotionally exhausted already. They made it, and I think they're a sitting duck for 4 straight losses to the New York Rangers right now. And frankly, I don't know what Detroit would have had left if they would have made the playoffs for the same reason. Although I like Detroit's chances against the Rangers a lot better than Washington's.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. It's one of those things where, and you know this, Steve Yzerman wants to build the Red Wings for the long term. He doesn't want to create a team that makes a cameo appearance in the playoffs, gets drummed like the Pistons have done in the past, gets drummed out in 4 games, and then you never see him again. He wants to make them consistently good, and that's what I wrote in today's column. He wants to make them consistently good, and because that's what those are the teams that he played on, and those are the teams that he built in Tampa. So what do you say? And I know I've seen you on Twitter. You get frustrated like I do with some of the fans. What do you say to folks who are hell-bent on playoffs or bust? Are they putting too much emphasis on just making the playoffs, or do you think that they have, are they looking at the big picture?
I think Steve Yzerman's doing it the right way, and I think he's earned our patience, our respect, and what this team has done the last 5 years since he's been here. Gradually, I read your column today, by the way, and I encourage everybody to read it. It brought back a lot of memories for me in his experiences. I want to go back to when he was a rookie, when he was, even before the Red Wings drafted him. If you allow me to talk a little bit of history here, okay?
Sure, of course.
But when Jim Devellano was hired as the very first hire that Mike and Marion Ilitch made, they took him out to dinner, and they said, it was Marion who said, "Jimmy, how long is it going to take us to win the Stanley Cup?" And he said, "Marion, it's going to take us about 8 years." And she was nonplussed. She was outraged. 9 or 8 years. My God, I'm going to be an old woman by then. I'll never be able to go on the ice, and on, right? She couldn't believe it's going to take. But that's the whole draft and develop philosophy of the New York Islanders, where he came from. It worked for them pretty darn well.
Right.
But the problem was, 8 years into his tenure in Detroit, they're not really close yet. It took him 14 years. 14 years. Steve Yzerman took over 5 years ago in Detroit, inherited a team that was as much of a mess as the one that Jim Devellano inherited in 1982, at least as much as a mess. The problem today is that it's a whole lot more difficult to make the playoffs and win a Stanley Cup than it was in 1982. Right. We're 5 years into a rebuild that might take 14 years. Let's hope not.
Right.
Listen, the Wings were relevant in about 10 years. 92, 93, 94, they were one of the elite teams of the NHL, just couldn't win in the playoffs early on. But it's going to take time. And I think people who want to think that Steve Yzerman is on the hot seat going into next season, that's bull. That's baloney. They have no idea of his relationship with the Ilitch family. He's a son to Marion Ilitch. He will never get fired, ever. Or even be criticized by that family.
Well, I mean, it's fair. It's fair to, if you want to criticize them, that's fine. Hey, everybody's got their opinion, and that's fine. I mean, there's no getting around that. But I think it's funny when you say that. I didn't know that Jimmy had said 8 years. I wonder if he said that knowing in his heart that it was not going to take 8 years. That was a horrific situation that he inherited. In 82, just absolutely horrific. But the comparison, Keith, to the teams you covered in the early 90s, this, they were high scoring teams, high octane offense, but their downfall was not being able to keep the puck out of their own net. And I'm seeing now until they finally solved that with Mike Vernon and later on with Dominic Hasek and so forth. But they were, they were in shootouts a lot, and the whole, maybe we'll get into the story, by the way, a little bit later on when you could tell us a story about Stevie almost being traded to Ottawa. But the thing is that they finally figured out that they need to keep the puck out of their own net, and that's when they started to, and of course they got Brendan Shanahan and so forth. Do you see any comparisons? I've alluded to this with you on Twitter. Do you see any comparisons between the ascent of this team and those teams you covered in the late 80s or into the early 90s?
Somewhat, Greg. Somewhat, I do. The problem was this team doesn't have a Steve Yzerman or a Sergei Fedorov or a Nick Lidstrom and a Vladimir Konstantinov and so on. It's got one. I wouldn't even call Dylan Larkin a superstar. As much as I like him, as good a captain as he is, all those things, he's probably a number 2 center on most teams. And on a championship team, a Stanley Cup team, he's probably a number 3 center. when you look at the way the Red Wings are built. Steve Yzerman, where was Steve Yzerman when they won the first Stanley Cup? After Sergei Fedorov and Igor Larionov, he was a number 3 center pretty much on that team.
Yeah.
But so the Wings don't have superstars to build around today, like Devellano and Brian Murray had in the early 90s. But there certainly are some comparisons in that this team doesn't play very good defense. This team doesn't have much goaltending. They don't have a number one goaltender. They had to trade Steve Chase on, a really good defenseman, away to get Mike Vernon, and brought him in from Calgary and really solidified the goaltending situation. Guy's in the Hall of Fame today, for God's sakes.
Right.
And he was a really good mentor for Chris Osgood, in my view, another Hall of Famer who should be there 400 wins later. But they got their goaltending sorted out in the early 90s. And they really need to do that with this team. It starts there, and Steve Yzerman's got a lot of work to do over the summer. It starts the goal. I think he's got to find a guy like Jacob Markstrom or somebody like that who can really hold the fort as a legit number one goaltender for a couple of years until Klaus is ready.
We're talking with Keith Gave on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from mygregeno.substack.com. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Nick Milanovich is here, and so is Big Al. Beaton, let's bring Big Al in. What you got for Keith Gave?
Well, let's talk a little bit about one of the big controversies you're getting, at least from Wings fans anyway, is how the season wrapped up when it came to the tiebreaker and regulation wins. I was just kind of curious what your opinion is on the idea that the NHL apparently feels that a win in overtime is worth less than a win in regulation.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like the whole tie-breaking system that the NHL has. I would have preferred, a lot of people would, I'd like to see a one-game playoff between Detroit and Washington to see who goes to the playoffs.
There you go.
Just play it off.
Yeah.
What's one more game?
Right.
Major League Baseball did it.
Right.
Why can't the NHL and solve it right then and there? Those silly overtime. I don't understand why an overtime victory is worth any less than a regulation victory. It makes no sense to me. A win is a win, isn't it? I don't like shootout victories, but regulation and overtime wins should be equal.
Well, I think the league, and I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. I think the league is. I'm not saying I agree with this, by the way, but I think the league does it because they want to put a premium on teams winning games in regulation. But I don't know why there should be a premium on that. Like he says, a win is a win. I know what the league cares if you go into extra time to win a game. I don't know whatever, but. That's the technicality, but the bottom line is that the lesson learned is don't go into the last day of the season needing help.
Well, they went into overtime against Montreal those last two games, and another couple of overtime games earlier the week before. They win a couple of those games in regulation, and they win that tiebreaker. So they kind of did it to themselves. By getting behind early and having to catch up. All credit in the world that they came from behind, tied those games up, won them in overtime. But had they won them in regulation, it'd be a different story right now.
Keith, were you surprised at how the team went into the toilet after Dylan Larkin went down? He went down at a time late February where we all thought that, hey, okay, that's okay, bad timing, but you know what? They're playing so well. They'll keep their heads above water. All they need to do is maybe play 500 while he's out. Just scrape together enough points to kind of keep your heads above water, and everything will be fine when he comes back. And lo and behold, 7 losses in a row, and not only losses, but they looked awful in losing those games. It's almost like they just unraveled. Did that surprise you?
Yes, it did. I'm thinking, well, they got stars, maybe a superstar in Patrick Kane. They got Alex DeBrincat. They should have enough to at least play 500 hockey, but they didn't. Those two guys I just mentioned disappeared. Right. They caught a cab and they were gone. The only guy who showed up, two guys who showed up when they really needed him, was Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider. Lucas Raymond became a superstar in the last month of the season, in my view. I love that kid. I see a lot of Steve Yzerman in that kid. You watch him. He's going to score 40 goals next year and have a hell of a year. He's going to have a great career. But here's the thing. Dylan Larkin went down. He's their number one center, and we just talked about the depth, the lack of depth at center. They got a number one center in Dylan Larkin and a bunch of number three centers. They don't have a number two, really. Right. Not an NHL number two. Right. So now Dylan Larkin goes down, and you're scrambling to put lines together with they're all donuts. They got there's a hole in the middle of all these lines. I would have liked Steve Yzerman. I know it reeks of panic, but I would have really taken a shot at filling a hole. You know that Larkin's not going to be back for another couple of weeks, right? The trade deadline is coming. At the trade deadline, the Washington Capitals traded Yevgeny Kuznetsov to Carolina, a number one center, Alex Ovechkin's running mate. I know he's kind of a big ticket guy. He's got some baggage. He was on the player assistance program this year, and the Washington Capitals cut ties with him. There's a legit number one center. You plug him in and you hope for the best. You try and play 500 hockey while Larkin is out. Larkin comes back. You have a number one and a number two center that you can plug right in and play. I think it would have made a heck of a difference. I know that like Yzerman himself would say, that's like pushing the panic button. He wasn't going to do that. But I think he should have. Another guy who was available, and I know he's hurt at the time, was Thomas Hertl, who went from San Jose to Las Vegas, right? At the deadline. Another legit number one center that the Wings could desperately use or could have down the stretch. So back to the question. The original question was, I think I'm rambling, and I want to make sure I answer your question. I think he should have tried to make a move at the deadline to help his team a little bit because they were desperate for centers.
We're talking with Keith Gave here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from mygregeno.substack.com and at Greg Eno on Twitter. You just heard from Big Al Beaton, and Nick Milanovich is here, of course. So let's bring Nick in. What you got for Keith Gave?
Right on. Well, we mentioned his name, and now one of the situations that Yzerman has to decide on is Patrick Kane, whether to bring him back or not bring him back. That's kind of, I hear things like maybe he'll be back, maybe not. What are your thoughts on that?
I could care less.
Should they bring him back?
I wouldn't miss him if they would let him go. He's fun to watch sometimes. He scored some big goals, but where was he when they needed him most? Yeah. He and DeBrincat is supposed to really like playing together. It was clear they liked playing together. They just didn't accomplish much. You're paying a lot of money to DeBrincat, and now Kane's going to want a lot of money for what? If to perform like they did this year, I'd rather bring up Berggren or some young kid and develop their kids. All Patrick Kane is doing is stealing development time from a lot of kids they have in the farm system that need to get up and get playing. So I don't care whether they sign him or not. What do you guys think?
Well, like I said today, as the roster is constructed right now, I find it hard to think the Red Wings are better without him. But I can also see, I also called him out to say, just like you did. He disappeared when Larkin went down. Absolutely disappeared, and he committed some really lazy, silly penalties, and some of these late games where that put unneeded stress on the PK unit, and they had to kill some big time penalties at the end of games that would have knocked them out of the playoffs if they had given up a goal. So I won't be heartbroken if they don't bring him back, but I think Keith and I have said this in the past too, that I think the decision is more Canes than it is the Red Wings, frankly.
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is, and I think that Yzerman's not going to break the bank to bring this guy around. He's probably going to want term. He's going to want a lot of money, and at what expense? If you're going to spend money, spend it on Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider.
Let's talk about Raymond. You mentioned he kind of came into his own, and that's probably putting it mildly, Lucas Raymond, during the last month of the season. The thing that impressed me about him was the quality of the goals that he scored. So many goals that he scored were important. They were key. They were either go-ahead goals, game-winning goals, game-tying goals. He had the hat trick late in the season, for example. He just seemed to put the team on his back, which you didn't necessarily think was going to happen, given all the other veteran presence that they have on the team. And just talk a little bit about this guy. I mean, I don't know what you can say more than we already have, but what about this? You mentioned a comparison to Yzerman. Kind of expound on that if you would.
Well, he's a right-hand shot. The way he moves with the puck, and without the puck, the way he sees the ice, he's got elite smarts. He can play a physical game. He can take a hit to make a play, but he raises the level of his game when the team needs him most, as Steve Yzerman did, as Sergei Fedorov did. Those guys are pretty rare. And this guy, talk about living up to the moment when the team needed him most, scoring the tying goal, the overtime goal in the game that they desperately needed. But he's been doing that. He did that all through. Like I said, he was the only guy giving this team any consistent offense when Larkin was out. The only guy, and that's the one thing that I didn't much care for when they when they signed Patrick Kane to begin with, is that Kane and Larkin, Lucas Raymond and Larkin were a really nice fit together. And you bring in Patrick Kane, and he bumps Larkin down to another line to play with Larkin and DeBrincat or whatever. I just thought that Patrick Kane would eat up some really important minutes that Lucas Raymond will get. Well, it turns out that Lucas Raymond just took those minutes back, and because of the way he played, he raised the level of his game, whereas DeBrincat and Kane did not. And if we could look forward to another 10 seasons, 12 seasons of that from Lucas Raymond, we're in for a treat. And frankly, in September at training camp, I'd pin an A on his chest, along with an A on Mortiz Seider, and and show people the future of your hockey club is in these guys' hands.
Well, just to follow up on that, let me follow up on that real quick. Because the thing is, they're both due for contracts, specifically Raymond and Seider. And the Wings are going to have looks like they may have some salary cap issues, and it might be really exacerbated if these guys if they go long term. If they go with the Larkin, the DeBrincat type deal. Is there any chance they think about going with a bridge deal with these guys, or do you just bite the bullet, lock these guys down for 7-8 years at $8 million a year?
I would bite the bullet and sign them both for 8 years. And the way Yzerman negotiates, they could get him 8 years at a pretty reasonable number, because Dylan Larkin is making so much, and we can't pay you more than we're paying our captain. That kind of talk. Yzerman's a very shrewd negotiator. I don't know who these guys, their agents are, but listen, we're since the COVID years, we're going through some financial challenges the league has, right? Mm-hmm. The salary cap has grown just very incrementally over the last several years, but it's going to start growing like $4.5 million next year. The money's going to be there 7, 8, 9 years from now. They can afford it. They can afford it. These two guys are too important not to sign for as long as you can. And the thing is, they're going to be young enough when their 7 or 8 year contract is over to sign another big one, probably.
Who does Mo Seider remind you of?
Oh, that's a really good question. Who's the kid played in St. Louis, played everywhere. Chris
Pronger?
Little Chris Pronger around him. Yeah, little Chris. He's got plays with an edge. He's good defensively. He's really good offensively when he needs to be. He won't back down. They're done to have to fight, but he'll get in your face if you need it. Trying to think of who else he might remind me of. He does. His all-around game is so good. This is so rare for a defenseman that defensemen are usually good at one or two things, not everything, like Mortiz Seider is. I'm not sure.
Well, he doesn't. And hey, it's okay to say you're not sure, because he's still so young. He's only played 3 years, and maybe he's not comparable to anybody. Maybe he's Mo Seider. I mean, that's okay too. This kid, Edvinson, though, Keith, I noticed that when they brought him up, number 77, they immediately threw him on the PK, which you usually don't see done with a young kid like that. What is that all about? Is that just supreme confidence, or is that they were just exasperated at the play of their other defensemen who were regularly in the PK?
Well, I think that's exactly it. That's that shows you what a lack of trust that they have in the rest of their defense corps. And the kid did pretty well, I thought.
Yeah, I thought so.
He was in games in the last minute of games where they're trying to preserve a lead or tie a game. I was impressed with the minutes that he got down the stretch, which only leads me to believe that he probably should have been up a lot sooner than he was, because they sure as hell could have used him. This defense corps is not very good. And that's where, aside from finding a goaltender, that's Steve Yzerman's next chore, is trying to find 3 defensemen who can play in the NHL next year.
The goaltending situation, we should say we lost Nick Milanovich, but we hope to bring him back here. The goaltending situation is, I compared it to Dave Dombrowski's bullpen back in the earlier 2000s. He just couldn't. Steve Yzerman has had trouble solving that, and just like Dombrowski with the bullpen, it was never a lack of trying. It was never a lack of signing guys, never a lack of trading for guys. It just seemed like whoever he brought in, just collectively, there was always that distrust level with big home runs were given up and so forth, and they just couldn't quite solve it. Or guys got hurt, like Nathan and so forth. I could go on and on. But the goaltending, though, again, same thing. It's not that Yzerman hasn't tried guys. It's not that he hasn't cut bait on people and brought in other people. He just can't seem. Is that just because, Keith, it's just so hard to find quality goaltender in the NHL, or is he just mistaken?
Yeah, that's it exactly. There are 32 teams out there, and probably half of them want to improve their goaltending. It's not in the best way to get them. Is to draft them, like Steve Yzerman drafted Vasilevsky down in Tampa, right?
Right.
And he traded up to get Kosa ahead of the other kid, Wallstead, in the first round a few years ago. And right now it looks like Wallsted's a little bit farther ahead in his development than Kosa is. But nobody's giving up yet. Nobody's saying that Kosa's a bust. He's still developing, like you said, and I think you're in your column today. He's only 22 years old, or he's going to be 22 in November or something like that.
Yeah, right.
That's really young for a goaltender, really young. So the jury's still way out on that kid. I hope if he can come and play half as good as Vasilevsky did down in Tampa, we're going to have a goaltender that we can live with for a few years. But those guys are just hard to find.
Yeah, that's for sure. We're talking with Keith Gave here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg Eno from gregeno.substack.com and at Greg Eno on Twitter. Let's bring Big Al back into the discussion. What you got for Keith Gave?
Well, one person we haven't talked about during this entire discussion is Derek Lalonde. Now, I know there's a segment of the fan base that didn't like some of the things he said. I know specifically the "we're not supposed to be here" comment that was made during the presser. But apparently, it seems like Steve Yzerman, I don't want to use the term, gave him the support, so to speak, but it looked like Yzerman is fine with how the team's progressing. So what are your thoughts on the performance of the second-year head coach?
Well, I can see where fans are a little bit frustrated. That's fair, I guess, to be frustrated, not disappointed or highly critical, I don't think. But, as someone pointed out, the 3 of the 4 coaches that have been hired since Scotty Bowman retired have been rookie coaches. Dave Lewis, who replaced Scotty originally, and then they brought in Babcock, and then Blashill was a rookie coach, and now Lalonde. Nobody with a long track record. Nobody like John Tortorella or somebody with a lot of experience coming in to coach this team. And I was starting to think at the end of the season when it looked like they were screwing the pooch and not going to make the playoffs, that if Yzerman was really considering making a change, who would be out there to hire? Of course, my buddy Gerard Gallant keeps. I keep mentioning his name, but that's not going to happen, and I don't believe it's fair to ask for Derek Lalonde's job right now. They came this close. They missed the playoffs by 0 points.
Right,
They played pretty darn good. At the same time, Yzerman in his press conference said, we have to get better defensively.
Yes.
That's on the coach and his staff to get better defensively. So there's a lot of kind of culpability, blame to go around. The players didn't quite do it. The coaching staff has to coach better. The general manager has to do a better job getting the right players that the coach needs, particularly 6 NHL defensemen, to compete better in this league.
Nick Milanovich is back with us. Nick, thanks for coming back to join us. What you got for Keith Cave?
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. Literally, I have an ice pack on my phone, which is what I'm using for this.
Sound.
No?
All right. Well, I'll follow up on this, Greg, with this.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Keith, do you think there's any kind of a playoff mandate coming from either the front office or ownership for next year?
No. Well, you mean in terms of the coach?
Yes, in terms of the coach.
I mean, that kind of mandate? Yeah, maybe. I think there might be. Yeah. Even if there isn't from Steve Yzerman, there might be something in the ownership family. Yeah. Put pressure on the general manager to make a change. That's not unheard of in the Detroit Red Wings organization. Mike Ilitch nearly made changes behind the general manager's back before. I mean, before they hired Scotty Bowman, Mike Ilitch was negotiating a deal with Mike Keenan, for God's sake.
Right.
And it, that situation got really, really ugly, and it led to a family rift. Jim Lights and his wife at the time, Denise, headed off to Minnesota and then Dallas. And Jimmy D, it was a very, very contentious time. And Ilitch says, well, if we're not going to hire Keenan, who the hell are we going to get? Because this guy, we're not going to win with Brian Murray as our coach. And Jimmy D, pretty fast thinking on his feet, said, well, Mike, I got 2 names for you, Al Arbor and Scotty Bowman. And he said, which one do you want? He said, if you can get one of those guys, I don't care who, but get that done. If you one of those 2 guys. And he stopped negotiating with Mike Keenan. But Keenan was going to come and be general manager and coach. And you know what? If that happened, there'd never be any Stanley Cups in Detroit.
No, I agree.
We'd never have them. It would have been a mess. Would have been terrible.
Yeah,
terrible.
If I remember correctly, Keenan was he was using a technicality with his contract he said the Rangers reneged on something by like a day.
Yeah. And he went to St. Louis.
Yeah, right. And you're right. Keenan did not go out of his way to quell the Red Wings rumors.
Oh, no.
And but that's another story. Let's bring Nick. Are you ready for a question? You got something for Keith?
Can you guys hear me now?
I don't think
Yes,
he's
we can.
got this, Greg. Yeah. Oh, did I hear him?
I can hear him.
Oh, well, fire away.
Yep. Okay, great. Well, what I was thinking, and sorry if you guys already talked about this, but one of the things I was thinking about is now the Red Wings aren't. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
You can. Okay.
Yes.
So what the thing I was thinking about was the Red Wings now are in a different stage than they were like last year. Last year they were really officially rebuilding still, and expectations were low. Like now going into next season, I mean, one of the things they pointed out, and it's not any kind of surprise, is what do you call it? Defense and goaltending. Like, and would you comment on is it? It seems really hard to take the next step, which is where and a lot more their decisions will make a lot more impact than they have in the previous years, where they're just shuffling around rosters and lineups.
Yeah. So, they've had a goaltending carousel of they've tried veterans like Beniers and then young guys like Nedeljkovic and Husso that they thought might be ready for prime time as a number 1 goaltender, and then Obviously, Alex Lyon. He started the season as their third goaltender and almost saved their bacon down the stretch. But still, nobody has emerged in the last 5 years. Listen, they haven't had a number one goaltender since Chris Osgood retired, right? Really? I mean, Peter Mrazek. Yeah, it's a tough position that we talked about a little bit earlier, and then defense. They got a couple of pretty good young defensemen that they have to build around, and it takes time. Like, it takes time. You draft these guys, you develop them, which is what Steve Yzerman said in his very first news conference. He said it the other day. We still need some patience. I ask you for patience. You've been very good. We're going to need a little bit more time to make this happen. It's just like when Jimmy Devellano had that ugly team in the 80s. Didn't happen overnight. Took a long time.
Yes,
and
it sure did.
Right.
I mean, Steve Yzerman was 14 years in the league before he was finally able to raise the cup. And if we get a chance to see Dylan Larkin do that, if he's 32 years old when that happens, that's a pretty good thing. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Well,
here's another factor that comes in to all of that is, and this is what the Wings of the 90s didn't have to contend with is, and Yzerman does, is salary cap. And so that's a huge factor. Illich used to just open up his wallet and say, let's get another star. And you can't do that anymore.
Nope.
So Yzerman has to factor in, now I got to pay Raymond. Now I got to pay Seider because they're, showing promise. And you can't just bring in a Patrick Kane. Let's say he didn't kind of like whiff in a few cases and kind of disappear in the, when they needed him. It's not easy just to bust the bank for him and then have an actual team to build. So
I agree with you, and that's why I say I'd rather than invest in Patrick Kane, who's 35 years old, and you don't know what you're going to get out of him. That the hip held up pretty well for him. That was pretty good to see. But I would rather have him invest in younger players and develop his prospects in the NHL. Let him grow up on a little on the job training. Those are hard calls, but the good thing about Steve Yzerman, he's a very shrewd negotiator. He doesn't overpay for players. He didn't overpay for Steven Stamkos down in Tampa several years ago. You want to stay here and play? I can afford to pay you this much, and that's it. He could have got a lot more money other places. He wanted to stay in Tampa. And Yzerman doesn't hand out no trade clauses in his players like Ken Holland did. You give those no trade clauses like M&Ms, and put the team in a really bad bind. Yzerman he runs his salary cap a lot better than most GMs in the league. That's where he's worth the money they're paying him, $5 million a year.
Somehow Stevie got and I still can't believe this. Somehow Stevie got 2 first-round draft picks for Martin St. Louis out of the Rangers when St. Louis was 1 million years old. I don't know how he did that.
Yeah. Well, he's made some trades like that here in Detroit. He's whiffed on a few for sure, but he's made way more good deals than poor deals since he's been in Detroit.
You know what, Keith, before we let you go, I have to ask you this because we didn't get a chance to talk about this last time you were on, and I've been wanting to talk to you about this. I want to wind back go into the Wayback Machine here. Tell us the story of Yzerman nearly being traded to Ottawa, because some people think that's apocryphal, but that is real, isn't it?
Oh, it's very real. Very, very, very real. And people have interviewed Scotty Bowman about it since, and Scotty's really, as much as I love the guy, and I had lunch with Scotty a few months ago in February when I was down in Florida. Scotty's doing very, very well and says hello to all his fans in Detroit. But a lot of revisionist history with Scotty when it comes to that trade. Right. Absolutely, they nearly traded him. It was traded for Yzerman to Ottawa for Alexei Yashin in a package, right? Alexei Yashin, a Russian. This guy was fishing around trying to collect more Russians even then, and I was all over that that trade, those rumors, and it was really, really close. And I think even Mike Ilitch was at least didn't put the hammer down and say no right away. And it was the opening. It was the home opener of that season. I know there was a 93, 93, 94, 92, 93. It was a home opener. Yeah. And I had a column in the paper that day saying that this is what's up. This is what the gentleman or what the coach and the personnel director, Scotty wasn't the general manager, but he had lots of personnel authority and power. This is what the coach wants to do: trade your captain. And that night, when the opening night crowd players the lineup was they announced all the players, right? Introduced them all, and they waited number 19 last, Captain Steve Yzerman, and the ovation was something like what Gordie Howe got when he was introduced in the All-Star game when Joe Louis Arena opened, right? The crowd went crazy. It was long and loud. And then a few seconds later, they introduced the coach, Scotty Bowman. Boos, chorus of boos. The fans made their feelings known pretty, obviously. And I don't know if it was that night, or the next morning, but the owner picks up the phone and talks to Scotty Bowman and said, "You're not trading my captain." Period. But it was this close.
Wow.
And wow. Steve was pretty. He never really got contentious or said negative things in the media very often, but he was not very happy with the way that whole thing was unraveled. Nobody, at least if you're going to do it, at least have the courtesy to say something. Yeah. Nobody said anything to me about this, and he felt he deserved it, and he did. But that's how Scotty operated. The owner stepped in and basically didn't allow that trade to happen, but it was really, really close.
What kind of return could have they gotten for Steve Yzerman?
Alexei Yashin was a young Russian, a number one center on a really bad team, and we didn't really know how good he was going to be or how bad he turned out to be at that time. And a number one draft pick, and I think there was another player involved too. Two players in a number one draft pick. And as Scotty said, well, Ottawa would have never made that trade anyways because they could have never afforded to pay Steve Yzerman what he was going to make. Well, that's revisionist history on Scotty's part because he really wanted to make that deal.
Well, you talk about how the trajectory of the franchise may have changed with Mike Keenan. Can you imagine the change of the trajectory if that trade was made?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That trade and Keenan.
Yeah. Oh God.
My.
Oh, that's
yeah.
Chills.
Yeah. We were lucky to make it unravel.
Keith, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it. We could go on another hour or 2 hours with you as usual, but we got to cut it short. We appreciate it so much, and I know you'll come back.
My pleasure. Anytime, guys.
Okay.
Right,
thanks for having me.
Take care.
Take care.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks.
It's always fun talking to Keith. Always.
Of course it is.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Nick, are you,
sure.
Al? Can you hear Nick? Or are we okay?
Say something, Nick. See if I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
If he's talking, I can't hear him.
No.
I can hear him.
Greg, you can hear me, right?
I hope it's interesting.
But if Al can't hear Nick, then we've got a problem. So
Yes.
I don't know what we want to do about
Let me
that.
change a couple settings here. Maybe it'll make a difference. All right, try again,
Okay.
here, Nick. I cut a couple.
How about now?
Things in the settings. See if we can hear you, or I can hear it.
Can you hear me now? How about now?
Not a thing.
Another thing.
No?
Wasn't there an issue we had?
How about if I jump off and jump back on?
The last time it was.
Yeah, it was.
You couldn't hear anybody last time.
I couldn't hear anybody or anything, so we just ended up cutting it short.
Right.
So, but this time I can't hear Nick at all. I heard some fumbling. I hear a little bit of static, but that's it. But I heard you fine. I heard Keith fine.
Wow. I don't know what that could be.
Yeah.
How about now?
Let me try. I'm going to boot Nick.
Okay.
And then have him come back. So I'm going to kick him and then have him come back.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. It's just the two of us, and we're going to wait for Nick to. Let me try add to stage now. Let's see. All right. Oh, he's gone. All right. We'll see if he comes back. But
you could hear him at the beginning, though, right? I mean,
yeah, I heard him fine, and all of a sudden, I couldn't hear him when he came back.
Oh, when he came back, you couldn't hear him. Okay.
I couldn't hear him when he came back, which probably had something to do. That might have something to do with it.
Gotcha.
Because you and Keith never dropped, so I had no problem hearing.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
No, that's always interesting talking to him, though. That's the old, the sliding doors scenario. What would history have been like if one thing, or the butterfly effect, if one thing had changed of all that? Mike Keenan, could you manage him being the head coach of the Red Wings?
I remember
that would have been a train wreck.
I know. I remember that too. I remember when that was rumored, and I was, oh no, please no.
Yeah,
because everywhere Keenan went was, he was just a disaster wherever he went.
Yeah,
and he was like the Billy Martin of hockey coaches. And okay, here's Nick.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, we can hear him! Yay! I can hear you.
All right, right.
All right, let's continue with this podcast before something else happens. Hey, Greg, I think it's time for your birthday game.
It is time for the birthday game. Let's play a game we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro? Everybody knows how we play this game by now. Give Al and Nick a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if those two guys can correctly guess this person within the first two clues, tonight they will win a game of Michigan Rummy that they can fight over. So this person was born, guys, in 1961. He made his name in baseball. He was a left-handed pitcher, I will tell you that, who played his entire career from 1984 to 1998 in the American League East, the old American League East, albeit for three teams. He was very well known, though, as playing north of the border. I'll stop there.
Dave Steve?
No, Dave wasn't left-handed. Dave wasn't left-handed.
That's right. Damn.
But it's in that same
time frame. Yeah,
for sure. Got a guess, Nick?
I can't think of a left-hander. I'm drawing a blank. No.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We'll have to wait for question 2 of the birthday game. So
okay, fair enough.
All right, we do have a lot to talk about. So it's a surprising amount of news has gone on since we last spoke. The Tigers are still playing above 500 baseball. There's an pitching injury pandemic. We were going to touch on that last podcast, but we kind of ran out of time.
Right.
Obviously, we have lots of Pistons news. I don't know if I'd call it news or, we just think we have an idea what they're going to do. But why don't we start, guys, with Greg wrote about this last week, and it makes some news in these parts when it came out with Jared Goff. As Greg titled it, The Secret War of Jared Goff. And during a recent podcast interview, the Lions QB said the following, which I found hilarious in a way. Well, we'll talk about it. Quote, I have this thing for our local media where they almost relish in negativity at times. And maybe that's what gets clicks and that's what sells, but it's no longer what they need to live in. Like, hey, guys, we have a good team. We've had success. And my first reaction to this was, what? I mean, who in this town is a negative Nancy when it comes to Lions anymore? There's a couple of guys, there's a few trolls on 97.1 The Ticket. There's Carlos Monterez. But that's it. I mean, I don't know about you, Greg, but I just found this kind of – I don't know what he's saying. I have no idea what he's thinking here because this gives off Jim Caldwell Dungeon of Doom vibes. And I never bought into that either.
Yeah, I don't either. I was really surprised to see that. I mean, they're chanting his name.
Yeah,
everywhere you go.
The dude is beloved here.
They're chanting his name at minor league baseball games. They're chanting his name at Red Wings games. I don't know. Heaven forbid he play in Philadelphia, for God's sakes, or New York. Detroit is such a soft media town. I don't understand it. He came from LA, which is not hard either, by the way.
Right.
The Rams are like who cares about the Rams on LA? I mean, do they have a following? Of course they do, but they're not. That's not a football town. That's not a sports town, frankly. Right. And so I don't know where that kind of came. He was on a podcast and he was kind of casual. You know, I don't know if some of this stuff, Al, was tongue in cheek. If he didn't seem all that upset about it, but he did feel compelled to call it out. And
he brought it up, so there must be something there.
He says, well, it helps motivate me. It gives me a chip on my shoulder. I'm like, I don't know, what that's all about. But I mean, if he needs the soft Detroit media to give a chip on his shoulder, but it's not a big deal. I'm not. Like I said in the column, I'm not mad at Jared Goff. I'm just kind of amused. I'm kind of amused that he would take that tack in a town like Detroit. And I'm glad you brought up Carlos, by the way, because I brought him up in the column, although I didn't name him by name because I didn't think I had to. But there's a difference between that kind of negativity, which is the genuine whiny, bad hot take, complain for the sake of complaining thing, like what Monero's does. Yeah. And there's also negativity in the sense that people who are going to call you out and require accountability, like the old days, Al, with Al Ackerman and all the writers I mentioned in the piece, who would talk to you after a game and would not just be content with throwaway answers. There's those. That's the kind of negativity I'm talking about. Yeah, but I think Jared is talking about just frivolous. Anybody who, to your point earlier at the top of the discussion, anyone who doesn't lick the boot, I guess, is negative. I guess.
Yeah. Well, I get the impression that feels like he did a vanity search on Twitter. He got all the ugly stuff or something. Where do you fall on this, Nick? Do you think it's kind of silly too?
I was kind of amused by it too, and I mean, he's from California, played for the Rams in LA for a while, and I know from having lived on both the East Coast and West Coast, I think fans get surlier as you go from West to East.
Yeah,
with the kind of most extreme, like Greg said.
Yeah.
I've lived in Philly too. Like, my God, you remember the whole what's his name relief pitcher for the Phillies who blew it in the '93 World Series, Matt Williams, I think.
Mitch Williams.
He had death threats. They had to trade him because of death threats. Yeah. Like, that's how absurd it gets. You don't quite see that in Detroit. In Detroit, they'll hate you if you don't kind of like give it your all, show some grit, and are whiny. And but you'll get that from fans. The writers, no. Right. It's like the writers don't call bullshit. And Carlos it's just whatever he writes is inane. I don't know what else to call it, but it's just like I don't even bother reading it anymore. So I just don't want to know this absurd take. But
with him, you see the headline. It's
that he said it.
Yeah, but because I can think of a
and you're right. He's beloved over here.
Yeah, I can think of a handful of guys on the radio. So not even Valletti, because he bought into the Lions. I could say Brian Chapman, who works like midnights on Saturday. Maybe Rico Beard, because I don't even know why he's not on a major market. And maybe Jeff Rieger, because that guy is a professional troll. I mean, you see what he does on Twitter, for Christ's sake. But other than that, I mean, the beat writers are solid. I see very little negativity from the beat writers. And the columnists, other than Carlos, they're all pretty much, I feel like they're feature writers. These guys that like the Seidels and the Neos, even the Wojos, they aren't Joe Falls, Jerry Green types. They feel more like Wojo's a comedy writer. The other two feel like feature writers. And so it just seemed like a very strange thing to say about Detroit media. I don't know where like I said, it feels like he did a vanity search on Twitter and saw Joe Blow 69 say I hate Jared Goff, and that's what he's using for fuel, because that's the only negativity I really see in this town are the occasional randos on social media.
I mean, you even look at, let's take another example, my pet example, the Detroit Pistons. The two beat writers on there, it's like, how are you not screaming at the Pistons and ramming your head against the wall seeing that shit show? I mean, they've got some kid gloves on for the Pistons. So imagine a team that's good like the Lions. You're not going to get the kind of negative. I mean, you shouldn't be getting the negativity, and you're not getting it. So I don't know what he's seeing, honestly. So
let's wrap this up, Greg. What I know you wrote extensively about it, and this just kind of feels like there's very little Lions news. This popped up, and everybody jumped on it.
Yeah, well, hey, again, it's okay. I'm not mad. I thought it was more funny than anything because it's so absurd. But I don't know. I don't even know how upset Goff is about that kind of stuff. But he thought enough about it to bring it up. But whatever, we'll move on. The draft is this week. That's going to get buried as it should. We'll talk about real football pretty soon.
Well, we'll follow up on that. I guess do you guys think that the Lions might actually trade out of the first round in a draft that's held in Detroit? It would be fascinating to see Brad Holmes do that. I don't know how you did, but I would actually laugh. I think it would be completely on brand for him to trade out of the first round.
I said this before, and I'll say it again. I've seen now other people like on Twitter posting the same thing. It's like, I can't predict what Brad Holmes is going to do. Neither can the gurus. And, and far be it for me to kind of second guess him or doubt him, because he's hit on guys in the first round. He's hit on guys in middle rounds, late rounds, and they're all contributing to an NFC, a top NFC team now. So whatever the hell he's doing, I'm just going to shut up and watch. Because, he's not following into the dogmas that you would guess, and so it makes it harder to predict what he's going to do. But it looks like he's damn well doing his homework. So, and the proof will be in the season.
Right. Yeah, Greg, wouldn't it be fascinating? National TV, 29th pick comes up. Detroit crowd going bananas, and Roger Goodell walks up and says, "There's been a trade." That would be absolutely hysterically funny. And as Nick said, it could very easily happen because we really don't know what Brad Holmes is thinking right now.
Well, 29th is not 9th. Okay, so I mean, it's not like he's in the top 10 and would trade out of that. I'm like Nick though. Far be it for me to say what Brad Holmes might do, but I will say this: if no matter what he does, even if it is a trade, it's gonna be met with a lot of cheering because everybody in Brad they trust, and they may be a little disappointed that there's not a name being announced, but if there's a trade for more people, trading down to get more people, whatever Brad Holmes does right now is okay with the fans. Believe me. Yeah,
you're right about that. All right, with that, Greg, why don't you get to question 2 of the birthday game?
Sure. This is for the Michigan Rummy. This person was born in 1961. He's not named Dave Steve, but was in the same rotation as Dave Steve. Also eventually pitched for the Yankees and the Orioles. So from 1984 to 1998. And he won a World Series, of course, with the Blue Jays in 1992. And what else can I say? 186 games, and those.
Nick, you want to guess, or because I think I know who he's talking about.
I haven't the slightest idea. I'm drawing a blank. Everybody I think of is a right-hander.
Yeah. How about David Wells?
So go for it, Al. You can get the Rummy.
It's not David Wells. Oh, my goodness.
David Wells. That's a good guess, though.
Oh.
That's a good guess.
I thought I had it. God damn it.
No, that's not. That's a good guess, though. It's
Oh, my goodness.
It's also the same time. But no, that's not.
Oh my God! I'm naming all these pitchers and I can't get the right one. The third question better be a gimme.
Yeah, well, it
All
has
right.
to be, I guess.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here. We'll get to the hopefully the gimme question after we talk. I think we're going to talk a little Pistons. We'll save the Tigers for last, so we'll end on a more positive note than the absolute dregs that is the Pistons. Obviously, the season recently ended. They were expecting this to take a step forward this season, as we have all discussed ad nauseum this year on the podcast. Instead, the Pistons took a deep dive to the bottom of the EA, finishing with a 14-win year, the worst season in franchise history. Guaranteed at least the top 5 pick. Who knows what the lottery will happen, but they're going to have a high pick. But the core 4, who knows if that's anything. We'll talk a little bit about that because Stan Van Gundy had something to say about that. But reportedly, at the end of the season, during the beat writers came up with, I believe it was James Edwards had reported it, that the Pistons front office, specifically Tom Gores, wants to shake up the Pistons front office by hiring a president of basketball operations who would operate over Troy Weaver. And obviously Weaver's been the GM since 2020. What's interesting about this, rather than just can Weaver, which I think we all agree he deserves, he still has a job, and the new president would supposedly be given full autonomy to build and shape a franchise as they see fit. And I guess apparently Gores is going to let him make the decision whether to keep, rather to keep Monty Williams, rather to keep Troy Weaver, which I have no idea with this, Greg, because this feels like Tom Gores is just, he wants to be a good guy. I don't want to fire these guys, so I'm going to hire somebody who will fire these guys. Even though, especially Weaver, I can't believe he wasn't fired mid-season, and Monty Williams did nothing to earn keeping this job further. So it really feels like, Greg, to me, that Gores just doesn't want to be the bad guy.
Well, that could be it. It would be. I'll tell you what, though. If I was whoever, I don't know who they're going to bring in. I don't know who they're talking to, who they're interviewing, but whoever they bring in, that person better have some sort of assurity that he does not have to have any allegiance to Troy Weaver whatsoever.
Yes.
I mean, this new person better be able to come in and say, and with the authority to do whatever it takes, to get this thing back on track. And that means clearing out everyone. So the thing that scares me, though, I agree with you about maybe not wanting to be the bad guy, but what scares me, though, about this is that Gores is so hands-on.
Yeah.
And I think he's even more hands-on than even the three of us would care to think that he is.
Right.
Even more that's been reported. Is what scares me is that because he's so hands-on, I don't know if this new person is going to be able to come in and do those kinds of things. Now, Weaver ought to be completely shaking in his boots right now because whether it's Gores or whether it's this new person, his job is definitely on the line.
Right.
We've all worked for companies where they've changed bosses and the new boss comes in and there's a little certain, trepidation about that because you don't know what the new boss is going to want to do. But in this case, this is really, I don't know if Gores doesn't want to be the bad guy, Al, so much as he's just trying to placate everyone. And if it means that that he brings in a new guy and that guy fires Troy Weaver and Tom says, well, you know what? That's what so-and-so wants to do. That's what so-and-so is going to do. I don't know, but I think people are a little bit uneasy. I can't wait to hear what Nick says, but I think people are a little uneasy about bringing in another guy to add to this horrific front office.
Yeah, because we both know this is Nick's favorite topic to discuss is the Detroit Pistons. I mean, he's made that clear.
Brace yourself, though. I was thinking too that maybe he's going to bring this guy to kind of clean house, so Gores doesn't have to. But they got to hire somebody to replace these guys too, and also it's I think less so if he fires Weaver is the issue. Is like, what do you do with Monty? Right. You paid him a ton of money, gave him a ton of years, and probably the thing to do is to get rid of Monty. He was a disaster, as a coach this year. Just utter disaster. But in order to save face for the stupid move that Goris did in the contract he gave him, he's going to give it to the Pobo, I guess is what you call them, and
Right.
let that person decide whether to axe Monty or not. Which I don't know how you keep your job, with coaching a team that he did. So I think there's part of that. I dread to think who they actually end up hiring, and whether Goris is going to intermeddle, like Greg said, or if this guy is, where are they going to choose him from? Are they going to pick him from like the Denver Nuggets, or are they going to pick him from the Washington Wizards? Also, so are you going to poach someone from a good team who knows what they're doing or not? And I have no idea what's going to happen. I don't think I could get excited about any president of baseball operations. Even if you tell me who they are, I won't even know anything about them, to be honest. So is going to have to make some serious changes. He's going to have to get rid of Troy Weaver. Because, I don't know, whatever Weaver did is just weird. How do you trade half of your team mid-season? Literally half of your team. It's just like, have you ever heard of anything like that? That was insanity.
Well, this is the guy who traded.
The net result was like nothing.
Yeah. Weaver's the guy that traded 2 draft picks to get Marvin Bagley, and then traded 2 draft picks to get rid of Marvin Bagley. So, yeah, it's, honestly, I think the only way I would get excited, guys, is if whoever this Pobo is, if he just blows it up, cleans house. Because I think that's really what this needs. And if that even means getting rid of like a guy like Arn Tellem, who's supposedly just the business guy in the front office, but he's probably being an ex-agent, he's probably got his figures in what's going on as well. It feels like, guys, that this entire front office just needs to be, front office and coaching staff just needs to be blown up. And there's no redeeming value here at this point.
Yeah, I
don't think Tellem is going to go anywhere, or Stefanski either. It's like you need actually one more cook in the kitchen on this thing. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
So sorry, Greg. You were going to say something?
No. That's fine. That's fine. All I was going to say was kind of what you just said, is that there's just too many people. I don't even know what those guys do. I don't even know what Arn Tellem does. I don't know what Ed Stefanski does anymore. I don't know. Honest to God, I don't know. And I don't know where, how decisions are made. I feel like Gores has way too much input in those decisions, which he shouldn't have. There's no owner in basketball, especially in basketball, who even touches those kinds of decisions. And that always makes me nervous too. When there's very few, if you look back in the history of team sports, especially since we've all been kind of following it in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and so forth, when the big money has been thrown around, very few, I can count on one hand the amount of owners who have had success by being that involved in micromanaging their teams. Almost all the time, the teams that win championships are teams that have owners that first of all, you don't even know who the owner is, which is good. It's kind of like an umpire. You don't want to know who the names are. If you know who the names of the umpires are, that's not a good thing. If you know who the names of the owners are, that's not a good thing either. These owners who are just like, you don't even know who they are, those are the best ones to have. Jerry Jones, well, when's the last time that the Cowboys won the Super Bowl? They've gone on almost 30 years now without winning a Super Bowl. Jerry had some luck, some success early, when they bought the team in the late 80s and then into the 90s. Yeah, for sure. But since then, it's been one playoff disappointment after another. He's gone through a million coaches. So you can look at him and say, well, he's an example too of a micromanaging guy who's on the sidelines, and God knows what kind of input he's got in the day-to-day operations of the team. And that team's not any good, really, in terms of they haven't done anything. And they might have some good regular seasons, but they don't do anything in the playoffs. But these owners, like the Hunt family, all these other successful teams in I'm using the NFL as an example, but you can use any other sport. The teams where you don't know who the owners are, you barely know that they even exist. those are the ones that have the success. These micromanaging, narcissistic guys who want to get all the publicity and getting their hands involved, and Gore's talking about rotations. My God, that's never been successful in the NBA. Never.
Well,
No,
speaking of
I mean,
never
like,
been success-
take
yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just thinking, like, with a basketball example is like Jerry Buss with the Lakers. And you kind of, in his case, you did kind of know who he was just because it was LA Lakers, but he knew like he knew how to like be involved without being meddlesome, and they were wildly successful franchise under his ownership. Well, even Bill Davidson figured it out too, and I'm sure he was involved with Joe Dumars and what they did, but knew where to kind of like stop, where the boundary was. You're right. It sounds nuts if an owner is talking about lineups, and it's like that's a bridge too far. So
wasn't Davidson kind of the man behind the reason that what's his name, Rick, who was the coach before Larry Brown, Rick Carlisle. Remember it was Carlisle, and the main reason he was fired was because he wasn't getting along with people in the front office, wasn't getting along with not the team itself, but he was not getting along with anybody else. In the front offices from secretaries to the owner. And that's why he was canned, even though he was successful as the Pistons coach. So, sometimes you can have an owner that makes the right moves. And it's obvious Bill Davidson knew what he was doing. Unfortunately, Tom Gores doesn't. And he's right now, I would just say Tom Gores is a bad owner until he proves otherwise, much like Mike Ilitch was a bad owner until he proved otherwise, at least when it came to the Tigers. All right, speaking of bad. We got Stan Van Gundy. This is another podcast interview. And Stan may have been a bad GM, but he still has a good, he was a successful coach and he knows what teams take to win. And his assessment of the current Pistons was pretty darn brutal. He said that the Pistons need to be aggressive with their $60 million in the cap space that they're supposed to have, because in his words, the young core isn't good enough. This is what's really, I found this fascinating. He says the problem I think from Detroit's perspective is, what are you going to do with that cap space? When are you going to try and win? My guess is Tom Gores wants to get this thing moving quickly. He would know from experience, wouldn't he? And they're not going to sit around and wait on a young core. And this is what really caught my eye was this quote. And that's probably the right approach, because Orlando is as younger than the Pistons, and they're better than Detroit. San Antonio's got a brighter future. Oklahoma City is the youngest team in the league by minutes played, and they're the number 1 seed in the West. So you might like your core, but it's clear that they're not the best young core in the league, or even in the top 2 or 3. And here we have people talking about the Pistons core 4. I don't know about you guys, Greg, but I think it's a core 1, and everybody else, I don't think they're untouchable at all. If you can make trades with some of these guys, do it, because I think it's Cade Cunningham and a bunch of role players. I don't think there's any other all-stars on this team.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with you. And Stan caught some flack. Some folks on Twitter were just failed to see what he was trying to say and just focused on his lack of success with the Pistons and say, so we're going to listen to this guy. I'm like, okay, you know what? Okay, time out. Yeah, okay. Stan he wasn't a good fit. That was the wrong thing to do. They made him the coach and the GM at a time when that business model had long gone in the NBA. That was a dinosaur, and that was 5 or 10 years too late to try that thing. And okay, fine, it didn't work out, and he'd be the first to admit that it didn't work out. Okay,
right.
But he's right.
Yeah, where's the lie?
In this regard, I don't care who's saying it, or if he was successful or not successful. What he is saying, the substance of what he is saying, is right. And it was, maybe hard to hear, but he's right. I'm with you, Al. It's Cunningham and everybody else, as far as I'm concerned, can be shipped out tomorrow. I have no allegiance to anybody else on that roster. Yeah. I would like to see maybe Ivy stay, because I think he's got something. But hey, other than that, I don't even know Yeah, he's right. Stan's right. Absolutely right. And I don't know. The scary thing, though, is that he's right. And I don't know what you're going to do to fix it.
Yeah, I don't know where you fall on this, Nick, but I don't see a single lie in this quote from SVG. I think he's dead on.
I totally agree with him too, and I did see his comment posted on Twitter, and a lot of people giving him flack, like, "Well, you didn't do well." Well, the guys doing now are even worse. So, but I think you're right, Al. It is a core one. They started talking about the core of the team. It's like, no, these guys are all, other than Cade, all of these guys are development projects. And how many of those can you have simultaneously and expect to win any basketball games? You can bring in one or two rookies. Like the Bad Boys era, they brought in Rodman and Sally as rookies, and but they were surrounded by a veteran team. So you can absorb the mistakes from rookies. And if you put an all-rookie team, this is kind of the beef I have with the Tigers too. You put in a bunch of young guys, you're going to get garbage out of that. There's no way you're going to hit on that many young guys certainly not in baseball and even with basketball. Asar Thompson's got a lot of energy, jumps well, maybe defends, but he can't hit water if he fell out of a boat. Right. Ivy has a lot of development work he's got to do. Duran has some good qualities, but he's got a lot of work he's going to do.
He can't.
How long are you going to ride these guys? And right. So I mean, they may they're really young and they may get that way in a few years, but you want to go with 5 guys that are that young and have that many issues for another 3-4 years? Are you nuts? And then you have to give them a second contract. And other people have said Isaiah Stewart is part of the core. Forget it. Just don't even start with me. He's a bench player somewhere, 9th man. Sure. Nobody fears his shot. Nobody fears his defense. Seriously. And he's 4 or 5 years in the league already. So,
exactly. Isaiah Stewart is John Sally, essentially. Like the second or third big off the bench on a good team. You nailed it right there. Anybody thinks
anger management issues?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God! And that's really what it comes down to, Greg. Is that when you look at the roster, you see how the season went. You see the uproar in the front office. You see the young players for other than Cade Cunningham who all struggled in one part of the game or another. And I can only come to one conclusion: this franchise is fucked.
Well, here's what has to happen. You're right about that. But what should happen though is, and I don't know that it will, but what the only path I see, and it's not going to be without pain. Right. It's not going to be without some further pain. I hate to say that. The only path, this is my opinion, the only path I see out of this is to bring in somebody else who has no ties to anybody in the organization whatsoever. Yeah. No ties. And let that person do whatever he wants and just stay out of his way. Give him 5 years and don't say boo. That's the only way you're going to get anything on and that's not a guarantee of success. I'm not going to tell you that's a guarantee because you still have to get the right person. But what you need to do at this juncture, where this franchise is on the timeline, is bring somebody else in from the outside, hope to God that he knows what he's doing, and let him do his thing. Gores get out of his way. Let him broom whoever he wants, including the trainer and the water boy and the concession stand people. Get rid of everyone and start from scratch. Number one, I think the fans would be open to that. Not that you have to do things to please the fans, but I think they would be open to that. And just let this person do his thing. That's it. Now, if you realize 3, 4, 5 years down the line that this person's an idiot as well, it's still better than trying to integrate a new person in this cesspool that the Pistons call a front office and try to have him, tiptoe around people and do things around people and try to please. He's just got to have the autonomy to get rid of everyone, and that includes the players too, of course, obviously. Get rid of whatever players he wants to get rid of. Whatever front office people he wants to get rid of. No one's job is sacred. The only person's job who should be guaranteed, unfortunately, is Tom Gore's. After that, everybody is on the block. Everyone. And that's the only way you're going to get out of this. Yeah, that's what Jack McCloskey did. They got out of his way. Jack came in a situation that was essentially, he told me, he said, Greg, when I came in, it was an expansion team. I looked at it as an expansion team. And it took him 10 years to build that franchise into a championship team. And he needed every one of those 10 years. Yep. Every one of those 10 years. And that was with making all the right, almost all the right moves along the way. But he got rid of everybody. He got rid of as many people as he could.
Well, yeah.
You know, and that's the only way you're going to get out of this.
Because you remember the famous anecdote, that's a famous story about Trader Jack. Didn't he offer the entire roster to the Lakers for Magic Johnson?
He did.
Yeah,
he did.
Because that's how little he thought of his roster, essentially.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. All right,
he said we would have taken Magic. We would have taken Magic.
Yeah.
Surrounded him with a bunch of CBA players and draft picks, and the way we would have gone.
Yep.
And he was prepared to do it that way.
And maybe that's what they need to do with Cade Cunningham.
Yeah, right.
Blow it up, keep him.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's very similar. It's sad. It's sad to say, but it is similar.
Yeah, and since we both know this is Nick Milanovich's favorite topic, I'll let Nick have the final word on this.
You know, I don't see any other solution other than to clean house. I mean, you can look at the Red Wings and say they brought in Stevie Yzerman, who isn't an outsider, and he cleaned up a lot of things. He had, he had the cupboard was bare in the minors. He, slowly started transitioning things, but I think he's got a blank check to do whatever he needs. I don't think the Pistons have some similar champion. You're not going to. Honestly, I hope they don't bring in Isaiah to clean house and stuff like that. He hasn't proven to do very well in that, but they do need to bring someone in and let them do their thing. Choose the coach, choose the system, choose the players. Have a general. If they're not a scouting person, find a general manager who knows scouting and talent, but doesn't look at just individuals. Looks at what culture are we building. What team philosophy are we building? Are the pieces going to complement one another? That's one of the big things that has been a disaster no matter who is in there the last 15 years. They may draft a player that ends up doing very well or picking up some young guy in a trade, but you put them together and it's been, gasoline in a match. They just did not go well together. They were just totally immiscible with one another. And I mean, that's as far as Weaver goes. He can look at an individual player saying, okay, he might be good. And but he did not put a good roster together whatsoever. It's been atrocious. So,
it's funny how you bring up a plan and culture and look at the Lions.
Right.
And that's exactly what they have. And look how successful it's been for Brad Holmes. So, I guess the Pistons need to find their Brad Holmes. Good luck with that. All right. Greg, this is where you either embarrass us or we get the question. So, question 3 of the birthday game.
Sure. 1961 Blue Jays from 84 to 92. The Yankees from 93 to 96, which also sounds a lot like David Wells, but it's not.
Yeah.
And Orioles, and I think Wells played for the Orioles too.
Yeah, exactly.
Blue Jays, Yankees, and Orioles. Left-hander. 9 years with the Blue Jays, 5-time All-Star, won a World Series with the Jays in 92. And he also won a World Series in 96 with the Yankees. And his last name is something you put into a padlock.
Oh, Jimmy Key?
Jimmy Key.
Jimmy Key.
That was a gimme. Thank you.
Jimmy Key.
He pitched that long.
I know. I was surprised as well. Yeah, he did. Yeah, Jimmy Key.
I totally forgot about him. I almost thought Mike Flanagan.
That was
that's another good one.
I was thinking about that one too. Yeah,
that's a good one.
That's a very good one. Yeah,
Flanagan's a little older, but that's
we sure know our '80s pitchers, don't we? Yeah, because they were all in the same division as the Tigers.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. With that, since we're not gonna get a gift, Nick, I'm kind of bummed out. Greg's gonna have to pull it off on someone else, unfortunately. So, All
Those are
right.
good parting gifts, though.
Oh, yeah, years with Royce Aroni. All right.
Right.
All right, let's end this podcast with some baseball talk. But let's start with a non-Tigers topic, but what has been kind of dominating baseball since the start of the year. And actually has been building for a while. That is the talk of a pitching injury pandemic. Pitcher shoulder injuries. It's funny, you never hear the term. It's more elbow, I should say, more than shoulders at this point. It's always Tommy John. But when's the last time you heard the term rotator cuff surgery? That was like the death knell back in the day. You don't hear that much anymore.
Right.
Well, now it's all Tommy John. It's all elbow ligaments. But regardless of all that, elbows seem to be exploding at a record rate. The two Cy Young favorites, Cleveland's Shane Bieber and Atlanta's Spencer Strider, both suffered season-ending elbow injuries, I think, in the first week of the year. Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, Garrett Cole, Sandy Alcantara have all spent time on or currently on the injured list. The Yankees have lost one of their top relievers. The Marlins have lost their top rookie, all to elbow injuries. Hell, we saw the Tigers, guys. I mean, look how many Tigers players have had surgery. Scooble had it when he was in college. Casey Mize is just coming back from one. Alex Faedo had it when he was in the minor leagues with the Tigers. But the Tigers just announced that Sawyer Gipson-Long, who was in the rotation last year, he's having Tommy John surgery probably as we speak. Spencer Turnbull, that's a whole other can of worms, he had Tommy John. And obviously, I know there's a whole bunch of minor league pitchers in the system who have had Tommy John. The players' union is blaming the pitch clock being shortened by a whole 2 seconds. MLB says they have studies saying otherwise. But there seems to be a lot more obvious reasons. And Justin Verlander, who I would believe him, said as much. And this is his quote. I think the game has changed a lot. It would be easiest to blame the pitch clock, but in reality, everything has a little bit of influence. The biggest thing is the style of pitching has changed so much. Everyone is throwing as hard as they possibly can and spinning the ball as hard as they possibly can. And I think that's it in a nutshell right there, guys. What do you think? That it's all about velocity and it's all about spin. And that's, we don't, and you have guys throwing 100 miles an hour right off the bat rather than pacing themselves like Verlander used to. So Verlander had a little bit extra where you could throw 100 or close to it in the ninth. Now you got these guys absolutely throwing heavy velocity from the moment they get on the damn mound. I think the pitch clock thing is just bullshit. I think it really is it's that, and I think it's kids who are throwing like that from like a very young age, like from junior high, and the fact that kids specialize. I mean, these kids, a lot of these pitchers have been just nothing but pitchers since a preteen. So I think you add that all together, and when they get to be their 20, 25 years old, they have a lot of tread going off off the tires, so to speak, and the arm blows out. I don't know where you fall on this, bitch. Yeah, I'm thinking of Mitch Williams all of a sudden. Thanks, Nick. But Nick, I don't know where you fall on this, but I think Verlander's right. I think it's just the style of pitching has changed.
I think he's right too. I don't think it's a pitch clock. I don't know if that makes things worse. But these problems were happening before the pitch clock was a thing.
Right.
So there was quite a bit of it. I mean, pitch clock only started last year, I think, and but these Tommy Johns were going on quite a bit. And guys are, young guy wanting to show that he has a cannon for an arm, wants to pitch 100 miles an hour. That's a hard pitch to hit for a hitter. But, your mechanics have to be flawless every single time because you're just putting your body through something it should not be doing, to be honest. Right. And, any little imperfection is going to show. The thing I never hear anymore are junk ball pitchers. Right. You remember that old term. There's plenty of them. Yeah. It's guys who got smart about pitching. They didn't need to throw 98 miles an hour to overpower somebody, but they knew how to pitch. They knew it. Yeah. He was and he started as a flamethrower too.
He did. Exactly.
And there were plenty of them. I think maybe Doyle Alexander used to be considered a junk ball pitcher. So, but, they could get, what's the purpose of the pitcher? To get guys out.
Yeah.
It's not just to show power every single time. And, these guys are shortening their careers, their playing time, by like throwing power pitches every single pitch after pitch. And, if I think about that, then it makes sense that the managers have to take careful note of how many pitches a guy throws, because you can't go in a whole game pitching in the high 90s and all just fastballs. It's just, you're going to tear a guy's arm to shreds. So I think it is the way, the sex appeal of the 100-mile-an-hour fastball that is driving all of this. So,
yeah, Greg, when's the last time you heard someone pitching to contact? Like a Greg Maddux. Those guys don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I know, and I'm glad Nick brought it up about junk ball pitchers, because I was going to go there too. I was going to mention that as well. You don't see that anymore. You don't see. I'm always amazed that more guys don't try to throw knuckleballs, especially maybe after they come back from Tommy John, because you don't. Hitters nowadays see so few knuckleballs. It was never a difficult pitch never an easy pitch to hit. Of course, it was never an easy pitch to master either as a pitcher. It's not as simple as some may think that it is. But I think what it is too, guys, is that pitchers know going in every fifth day, they're not expected to go much further than 6 innings. They're not expected to go much further than 90 to 100 pitches anymore. So because of those expectations, because we're so reliant on bullpens now, pitchers go into every start knowing they don't have to pace themselves. So somebody mentioned, one of you guys mentioned about pacing yourself. They don't have to do that really. But the changing of the speeds, the keeping hitters off balance, and you're absolutely right, Nick. Doyle Alexander was a great example of that. Frank Tanana, of course, who rebuilt his career by doing that and becoming essentially a junk ball pitcher, which is I don't never really looked at as being a criticism. That's just a style. But you don't see that very much anymore. You don't see the slow breaking balls that come in at 75 miles an hour.
The crafty lefty innings eater. Those guys have disappeared.
You don't even see the loogie anymore. You can't. They've pretty much legislated the loogie out of the game. But I think that I mentioned kind of half seriously a couple shows ago, maybe they ought to think about making the ball heavier, physically heavier, because the arm is not made to throw with that kind of torque an object that is that light. But of course it's been that way forever. But these players now, these are so much stronger. They have so much more snap and torque on their arms than any time in history. That it works against them sometimes in terms of their health. And we're not. This isn't going to go away, guys. This is not a blip on the screen. Just kind of a weird kind of anomaly. This is going to happen. Continue to happen. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when your favorite pitcher goes down. I hate to say it that way, but you mentioned at the top of the discussion, Al, the two guys you mentioned, Bieber and Strider. These are big name pitchers, and this is something that doesn't just affect the fourth or fifth starters.
Right.
This is and you hate to see it, but it's almost like a fait accompli anymore that these guys, when they come to the majors, something's going to happen. And I think you made some really good points, Al, about how pitchers are not, back in the day, pitchers would do everything. They play in the outfield. They play a position. They'd pitch every third or fourth, game for their high school team. But yet when they weren't pitching, they'd be the catcher or they'd be the shortstop. And then we don't do that anymore. And there's a lot of everything you mentioned as a contributing factor. You're spot on, but it's not going to, it's not going to go away. I don't know of anything that could make it go away.
Well, I'll ask you this, Nick. I think there's Greg mentioned changing the ball, but there was a change. They got rid of the sticky stuff. That was, and I think now that they're trying to create the same kind of spin, but they don't have that same grip on the ball, that could be played into it as well. So if they're going to make changes, maybe go back to allowing pitchers to scuff the ball a little bit or keep a little bit of sticky stuff up under cap, because this is just going to get worse.
Yeah, I mean, whatever is happening now, I didn't even know about the sticky stuff part, or I forgot that. But you can't continue doing this, because here's another thing bad for baseball as a business. If you're Cy Young caliber players go out for 2 years, you have no star power left either.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to want to come in and see some like no name versus seeing a Verlander on the mound too.
Yep.
So there's that. Let me ask you guys a question. I was thinking as we're talking about this, and we're talking about pitching, but I would say this about hitting, and to me, like it feels like baseball has lost the art of hitting and the art of pitching in the game. Now it's just more of a brutish type thing where a guy's trying to throw 100 miles an hour if he's a pitcher, and the guy at the plate is only trying to swing for home runs or striking out.
Three true outcomes. That's what the game is 3 true outcomes.
So it's kind of you're losing the art of like the base hit, the bunt, the steal, you know, the junk ball pitching, you know, just trying to get guys out somehow. And I don't know, it's kind of taking the fun out of it for me a little bit now that I'm saying this.
Well, I'll even remember, you know, back when I played back in high school, you know what the first thing you did when you got in the batting cage? You laid down like a few bunts. That was always part of your arsenal. You know, 'cause you know, even if you were a good hitter, sometimes there was a time. I'm not a fan of the bunt, but it plays into, as you bring up, Nick, the art of bat control, and that seems to be going away. Which is why I hated to see them get rid of the shift. You know who would be successful when you have one entire side of the infield open? Someone with bat control who could slap the ball in that direction. You know, and that's another thing. If they still had the shift, guys you talk about, Nick, would have, I think, even more of a place in the game today.
Yeah. So, and I'm kind of missing that. So it's gotten kind of boring for me, actually, as a sport. I've kind of like lost interest in baseball more than any other, just because it's kind of like been boiled down to just a few things, and that's all people obsess about. So, you know, I like the fact that a guy could drive in, have 130 RBIs versus a guy with 60 home runs and 90 RBIs. That seems like really odd to me. And I know people will piss and moan an RBI is not a great stat, but like, well, you're driving a guy in. A guy's on base and you're driving the run in. That's not a small thing. So,
all right.
But
well, I guess let's finish this whole discussion on a much better topic or more pleasant topic, and that would be the actual Tigers are playing pretty well. They're up tonight, 7-1 against the Rays. I believe it's in the 7th or 8th inning tonight. So it looks like they're going to move to to 13-10 if things stand as they should right now. But right now that they had a 6-1 start, cooled off some. They're still playing respectable baseball. They took 2 or 3 from the Twins this week. It looks like they're about to take the first game of the series with the Rays. They're playing around .550 baseball, third to the division. And weirdly, they've been much better on the road. It looks like they're about to go 9-3 on the road versus 4-7 at Comerica. But this is something we've talked about endlessly on this podcast in the past. Greg, was the Tigers' awful starts, and we were always like, if they could just play 500 baseball in April and May, who knows what could happen? And here we are. They're playing above 500 baseball as we get into late April.
Yeah, I mean, they are the pitching has been good. The bullpen has been outstanding.
Yes.
Offense has been a little bit, spotty, but I think we kind of expected that. And to Nick's point earlier, we were talking about relying in our Pistons discussion, talking about relying on young people, and that's what the Tigers are largely doing, relying on a lot of young bats. But hey, if you can pitch and you have a strong bullpen, you can win a lot of ball games. The problem that I'm seeing, though, that scares me is defensively, they're still shaky. They're still making too many mistakes defensively. They've coughed up a few games because of their defense, quite frankly. That's got to be tightened up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, and you've got a Royals team, by the way, which is so far surprising a lot of people. I didn't think the White Sox were going to be this bad. I knew they were bad. I didn't know they were going to be 3-18 bad.
Yeah, they're 2003 Tigers bad.
Right, but I didn't know that I wasn't expecting the Royals to do what they're doing either.
Right.
And you look over at the West, you see the Astros, like 7-15 or something. So I know it's early, but yeah, I mean, it is. The Tigers are not burying themselves. which is good to see. They're not burying themselves in April, which is great. So that's a good thing. That's improvement right there. The hitting is a little shaky. Torkelson hasn't hit a home run yet, and so forth. Although he laid a really good bat on a ball yesterday that I thought was going to be a home run, just missed it by a couple of feet in Minnesota. But hey, so far so good. The thing I like about the bullpen though is I feel like it's sustainable. I feel like the bullpen is sustainable. They showed flashes of being really good last year. I like the veteran presence. I like guys like Chafin in there. I like that Hinch can kind of. Hinch loves this, by the way. He loves this kind of. This is his. He never had a bullpen like this in Houston either, by the way. He loves being able to go to whoever he wants, whenever he wants. He's never been comfortable with slotting guys in particular roles. Okay, here's my 6th inning guy. Here's my 7th inning guy, and so forth. He loves being able to look at his bullpen in its entirety and say, okay, who do I need? Depending on whether they pitched the night before or whether he needs to get them in a game. He feels like he can bring anybody in almost whenever he wants, no matter even if it's a high leverage situation. He loves that, and they're responding. I mean, I think the bullpen likes that as well. I think they kind of keeps them on their toes. You don't have a guy thinking, well, it's the 7th inning, we're up by 2 runs, and I'm not going to be used. No, I might be used right now. I might be used in the 8th inning. I might even be used a little bit in the 9th inning. He's used more than one pitcher in the 9th inning, which anymore. When was the last time you saw a manager use more than one pitcher, a relief pitcher in the 9th inning? Unless, catastrophe happens, Hinch is willing to start the 9th inning with a guy, have him get an out, and then bring in another guy. Yeah. And he loves that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, and it's showing because as you bring in like Jason Foley, who was kind of the de facto closer, has yet to give up a run. His ERA is 0 with 6 saves in 10 innings. Right. But the bullpen, there's 2 numbers that stand out with the bullpen right now. They are, let me see, I have it here somewhere. Yeah. They lead MLB with a 1.65 ERA, and they lead MLB with a whip of 1. I mean, that's lights out, Nick, from the bullpen. Right. Lights out.
Right. I'll confess that I haven't watched any games because I've been here in Michigan without cable or anything of that sort.
I like it. He's home.
But the thing, I really can't. It's driving me nuts because I want to. The thing that's on my mind less so. I was actually less worried about the pitching overall because Hinch has showed that he can sort of pull a rabbit out of a hat with whatever the pitching staff he's given. The thing I'm wondering about long term is their hitting. Some days they'll hit a bunch, they'll drive in a bunch of runs, but other days they'll just get. Which series was that where like over 2 games they scored like 1 run? They just went. I think it was Oakland. They just went completely cold.
Right.
And they didn't really pick up anybody outstanding as far as hitters over the offseason. So they're going to be relying on Torkelson. Hopefully he gets hot. It's just kind of a slow start to the season. Carpenter was good last year, and I think he slowed down.
Actually, he has a 942 OPS this year.
He's like right. Is he going to sustain it throughout the? It's a long season, of course.
Well, they call him Kerry Bonds for a reason. And Riley Green is the other guy you want to bring up. He has a 1.4 WAR already and an OPS plus of 143. That's both way above. Yeah. I think his WAR is 7th overall in MLB, and his 143 OPS plus, Nick, puts him like the top 25 in baseball. He's having a hell of a year, even though his average isn't showing it, but he's hitting for power and he's walking.
Yeah, and as long as he doesn't kill himself crashing into the walls for a fly ball, which is the thing that
center. That's all they got to do.
So if he can stay healthy, he's going to get better. So I'm thinking more about the hitting, and because that's the one thing they've lacked for several years is the hitting's been absolutely anemic. So.
Well, Greg, you guys are heavy on to Detroit Twitter. What is the current feeling on Spencer Torkelson right now? Can't be very positive.
No, it's not. It's not. I'm not in that camp. I'm not in the Torkelson as a bust camp. I'm not in the, he's awful camp. But people are restless that he hasn't hit a home run. They're on his case about that. But he's doing some other things. I mean, he is hitting. He's starting to hit the ball a bit harder. Like I said, he almost had a home run yesterday in Minnesota. Missed it by like 2 or 3 feet at the top of the fence. He's smoking the ball a couple of times. I'm okay with him so far. I still think he's going to be a good player, but I think his ceiling though is I think where I differ with a lot of the Twitter folks and other social media is that I think his ceiling is lower than other people think it is, and I think people look at what they think his ceiling is and are comparing him to that. They think he should be a 40 home run, 120 RBI guy. He's not. He's not that guy. His ceiling is probably what he gave the Tigers last year. 30 and 90, and with a 230, 240 batting average and a low 300 on base. That's just what he is.
Yeah, a 2-WAR player at first.
Yeah, and that's okay. Yeah. I mean, but again, like I've said a million times, that's okay if you continue to bring in more pieces to surround him. And Nick talks about the young hitters and they need help. He's right. I mean, you got to keep bringing in more hitters so that we don't focus so much on Torkelson, and we don't focus so much on Green, who's actually having a pretty good season. And this Carpenter, by the way, all this kid has done from high school all the way up. High school, college, low minors, mid minors, MLB is hit. That's all he does. He hits. He's a hitter. It's what he does. That is his thing. He is a hitter. And he's not showing me anything but that he's going to continue to be a good hitter. This guy is the real deal. Now, is he weak defensively? Sure. But offensively, he is a piece. He is definitely a piece. He's a left-handed hitter. He has an extreme confidence. I feel like he's got a real level head. Is he going to hit a slump here and there? Sure. But he is a hitter. And he just came right through the ranks as a hitter. Some of these kids that come through the ranks aren't as polished or refined as a hitter as Carpenter is. But this kid, all he does, if you look back, I did a column on him last year. I was doing a little bit of research. It's all he's done. From the moment he's picked up a bat, is hit. And that's just his thing. So, I mean, that's great. Tigers have a good one there. But the Torkelson thing is just, give him more, bring more people in. I mean, he's not the savior. He never was, and just because he was a 1-1, and I know a lot of pressure's on a 1-1 pick, but if he gives you 30-90, that's okay. It's not bad. There are a lot of 1-1s who don't even come close to that. I can tell you that.
Right. Yeah, and kind of follow up on Torkelson. I kind of like the idea that we all saw him struggle at defense, especially over this past weekend, where you could argue he cost the cut. If he didn't cost them wins, he sure as hell didn't help them win the game. But I like the idea that Hitch just said, "I'm going to start playing Marcana some at first base, and we'll DH Torkelson." And hopefully, that might get him out of his own head somewhat. I believe he has an RBI tonight, so something must be working. But I do like the idea, Nick, that I think Hitch likes this team in that he's got a bunch of guys he can play for the most part all over the field. Canna can play multiple positions. Ursula can play multiple positions. Riley Green can play multiple positions. Hell, Gary Carpenter can play multiple outfield positions. And I think that's been Hitch's mantra through this whole thing. I want to be able to take these guys and put them in a position to succeed. And part of that is being able to pick where and when you play them in the field and how you play them in the field.
I mean, isn't that a theme that we're hearing in a lot of other sports? We're hearing that a little more in football too, and then I'm hearing that in baseball. So you're not just kind of your defined position and that's it.
The positionless player. NBA is.
And I know, like what. Yeah. Right, and I hear that from the Lions too. They're looking at guys that can play and they can move them in like a couple different positions. So they're not just an end, or they're not just a safety. I hear that more actually for defense than I hear for offense.
Right.
But that's kind of. So you want the guy to be an all-around baseball player and play multiple positions. That's actually a nice thing to have.
Yeah.
One of the things I thought of though is, yeah, you can Torkelson's defense isn't good, so let's have him just hit and be a DH. Well, that's what you're doing with Carpenter. You don't want to start doing that with too many players at the same time, right? You don't want like a team full of DHs and
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Is
we
there
saw
like
that
a
before.
equivalent of? Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but no, it's great to have him move around in different positions where you can actually, you have flexibility in your roster.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Actually, it extends your bench more than anything else, especially in a league now where it's all about having as big of a bullpen as possible, which means shortening your bench. If you have guys who play multiple positions, then you get away from it's a little easier to get away with. So I'll let
if you think about
this topic. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to build on what you're saying. It's like if you have a shorter bench and your third baseman is out, you're screwed unless you have another guy that can just jump in. You're not going to carry just several like third basemen or several outfielders.
Right.
You basically need a guy that could, manage that position. So
exactly. All right, Greg, I'll let you finish up our Tigers topic before we're hitting the home stretch here. So, anything else you'd like to add?
Well, no, I just feel like this is a team that I know that Nick has had his concerns with Scott Harrison, but I feel like I just feel like they still, if they just continue to build on, continue to bring in bats. I just don't want it to, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want them to waste this pitching effort from the starters, and from the only starter who has not really impressed me so far has been Maeda. Ironically, the veteran guy that they brought in from Minnesota. Other than that, everybody's been really good, the starters and the relievers, and I just don't want them to waste this kind of pitching because they've got subpar hitting in a division that is very winnable, and I don't think the Royals are going to stay where they are. I really think it's going to come down to the Tigers and the Guardians. But I think I'm hoping that we're set up for a really fun summer. But I just don't want them to waste this. And I'm already seeing a little bit of it already where they've lost some low scoring games because their pitching's been good, but their hitting has not been.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a long season. We have an entire summer ahead of us. So I think with that, I think it's a good time to kind of wrap things up and move on to our jerk of the week. Vic, do you have a jerk for us?
Yes, I do. I am going to go with Travis Kelce. There was some videos showing him going to his commencement ceremony at University of Cincinnati, him getting his degree. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but when he walks up onto the stage to get his diploma, he takes a beer and chugs it down and slams it. And I just think, as much as I don't care for the pomp and circumstance of a commencement ceremony, that seems like a Neanderthal thing to do. It's not the place for it. It just looks dumb for him. So he's my jerk of the week for, I don't know, being a retard when he went with what he did. I don't care for it.
That sounds like it's completely on brand, to say the least. So, all right, Greg, who was your jerk?
Yeah, just the wrong place.
Well, this jerk of the week is kind of, I'm not really sure where my ire should be directed, but I look at Caitlin Clark's contract that she signed. She's by far the number one star. She's not the number one star in the WNBA yet, but certainly one of the most heralded number one overall draft picks that the WNBA has ever had, based on what she did in college. And 4 years, $340,000 or something like that. There are people at my office who make that kind of money, and I know that there's a problem that there's a gap between the WNBA and clearly between the WNBA and the NBA. I get that. I guess I'm not sure where to go with this, guys. I'm not sure if I'm mad at myself. Maybe I'm the jerk of the week for not knowing that there was this kind of a dichotomy in salaries between the WNBA, who I guess struggle with money, and their male counterparts. I was just aghast that we're talking about that's like 1970s type money for a 2024 number one overall draft pick. Now I know she's not going to go hungry. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that she's going to have to take a second job and wait tables because she's going to get, she's going to get some endorsement money and she's going to get money elsewhere and other niceties. I get that. But the salary structure in the WNBA, I didn't realize her starting salary is about $75,000 a year. I just find that absurd. And I don't know where to go with this. I might want to say the WNBA, but maybe it's not even their fault. Maybe they're only paying her what they're able to, and I don't get it. And I will say this real quick. I know who my jerk of the week is going to be in about 2 weeks. It's going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs because they're again going to lose. And they're again going to disappoint those fans. They have not won a Stanley Cup since 1967. And I guarantee I'll be sitting here 2 weeks from now talking about how the Maple Leafs got blown out by the Bruins, and their Stanley Cup drought will last yet another year. So that's my jerk of the week for May 6th. But for tonight, it's Caitlin Clark. Not Caitlin Clark. The salary being paid to Caitlin Clark.
Oh, for what it is worth, Greg, the Maple Leafs are tied with the Bruins after 2, but they're already, as you said, they're down 1 in their series already, so they could go. I'm
not saying they're not going to tease their fans, and they might even bring that to a Game 7, but they're not going to win it.
Yes, that's kind of like an evergreen, just like Carlos is an evergreen. With that. So, all right, guys, my jerk of the week is going to be something that happened this afternoon. I don't know if you heard about what Hunter Windelstadt did, the umpire. The MLB umpire.
Oh, yeah.
He ejected Yankees manager Aaron Boone for something a fan said, and it is. I can understand. It's on tape. It's on video that Boone was just standing there with his mouth shut, and Windelstadt ejected him for something that came out of the stands. But what's worse about it? I mean, accidents happen, But the worst part of it is, how often have we seen umpires do this, guys? He doubled down on this, much like the ref doubled down on the cluster that was the Lions reporting snafu against the Cowboys. Windelstadt said he heard something from the area of the dugout, and rather than determine who said it, Aaron Boone is the manager of the Yankees, and he is responsible for everything that happens in that dugout. And then he added, apparently what he said, there was a fan above the dugout. This isn't my first ejection. In the entirety of my career, I have never ejected a player or manager for something a fan has said. 1, that's probably bullshit. And 2, that's exactly what happened. So I think that's the frustrating things with umpires, guys, is that not enough of them admit when they make a mistake, especially a glaring one like this one was. This was a cluster, and it was all on Windelstadt. All he had to say was, I saw the tape. I screwed up. I apologize. I think the Yankees probably would have been happy with it. But by doubling down, that's my jerk of the week, Hunter Windelstadt. All right.
Good point about the doubling down. That's what always gets you. That's what gets you is not being able to just, like you said, I made a mistake. I blew it.
Yeah. Yeah. Who was the umpire in the Galarraga game? Yeah, Armando Galarraga.
Oh, Jim Joyce. Jim Joyce.
And that is, right there is the model of how umpires should handle a screw up.
Right.
He just said, I screwed up.
Right.
He just came out and said, I screwed up. It was my fault. I ruined this kid's perfect game. If there was Hunter Windelstadt, he would have said, he was out. So, anyway, that's my jerk of the week. All right, let's get the hell out of here, guys. So, Nick, why don't you get out where people can find you online?
Right on. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Nick Milanovich, and I'm there kind of on a regular basis. Love to chat about Detroit sports, complain about Detroit sports, or not complain about them, and remember the good old times. So, look me up.
Talk about the Pistons?
You could even talk about the Pistons. That's fine. There's a few guys that I go back and forth on that. So,
but
brace yourself.
Yes, indeed. Greg, if you got the social media and other things you might like to let the listeners know about.
Yeah, well, first I want to share some exciting news. We didn't get a chance to really talk about it, but 2 weeks from tonight, May 6th, we're going to be joined by old friend of the show, Dave Mesry, who's an author. A writer. He's a writer, and Dave has chronicled a lot of kind of under-the-radar stories in the past. We had him on, I think, a couple of years ago, talking about Ike Blessett. And the former Tiger Ike Blessett, and how Ike had some problems getting some pension money and so forth. And we talked about we even had Ike on. We also had Ike himself on as a guest.
Right.
And we've talked about that. We've had Dave talk about the Hamtramck baseball yard that he's involved with. And he kind of touches on things that people don't really talk about. Well, he's got another one. A guy named Gary Cooper, who played not the actor, the guy who played for the Atlanta Braves back in 1980, is one day shy of getting a Major League Baseball pension. And Dave picked up on the story, interviewed Gary, spent a lot of time with him. That story now is getting a lot of legs. I've seen it on CNN. I've seen it all over the internet. Dave himself, of course, wrote a story about it. And so Dave has been said, yeah, I'll come on. So May 6th, we hope to have Dave, and we hope to have Gary Cooper come on with him to talk about. Gary's now in his, I think he's in his 60s or high 60s, early 70s now, and we'll talk to Gary about his situation. Kind of one of those under the radar stories you don't hear a lot about. So kudos to Dave for bringing that to light, and so he's going to be on May 6th. I'm happy to announce that. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno. Follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter, of course, at the Knee Jerks. And please subscribe to gregeno.substack.com. It'll be in your inbox every Monday. I'd appreciate that. Thanks to my lovely wife, Sharon, for putting up with this nonsense. And thank you guys for making Monday nights so gosh darn fun.
I think we were insulted, Nick. He just called this nonsense. Oh, okay. Anyway, yes. Yeah, well, I guess you could call it nonsense. We are in life's toy store right now, and that's a good place to be sometimes with everything else that's going on. Anyway, with that, I'm looking forward to talking to Dave. Like I said, he is great at just a gadfly. I like to call him.
Right.
He really don't. He could. And then the stuff gets traction and stuff happens. Thanks to him.
Right, exactly.
All right, so I'm looking forward to finding out more out about this. All right, to find us online, I should say, to listen to the show, we're available pretty much anywhere podcasts are found. But the main places, Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube Music, that's where they migrated. Google Podcasts is now on YouTube Music. So you want to listen to us. If you want to listen to the audio version of us on YouTube, it's on YouTube Music. Okay. iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, where all the podcasts are. We're on Deezer, Radio Public, Ghana. We're on the kneejerks.net is our homepage. That's where you see all the links to all the things we discuss. You can download the MP3 straight from there. Do it with you want. And as always, please like, share, subscribe. And we are also live streaming on YouTube as we speak. We are streaming on YouTube. So we're everywhere anymore. The knee jerks are everywhere, guys. All right, I think that about covers it. So time to wrap things up because I could use a drink. I don't know about you guys, but it's time to get the hell out of here. So until this time, 2 weeks now, when we were talking to Dave Mercery, this is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha, along with Nick Milanovich.
Ciao, guys.
And Greg Eno.
Ciao, Italy. We'll see you in 2 weeks.